All right. Hey, welcome everybody. Got an exciting episode. My buddy and fellow Ranger CSM Clay Usie is on the episode today. And unfortunately, we've had to reschedule a few times because he's a busy man and everybody's always vying for his time. And we even actually had to delay a little bit today because, he's just out there, kicking ass in the world. And then we had comms issues. But luckily, we have the Master S6 NCOIC on the net, and we were able to fix it very quickly. Hey, if you don't know who Sergeant Major Clay Usie is, I'm just going to cover a couple brief highlights of his career. He was a battalion communication chief at 275. He was also the first sergeant of the Ranger Communication Company, the Regimental Signal CSM, Sergeant Major of the 75th. And also just a couple little fun facts that I actually found out about him. He was 2004 Army Times Soldier of the Year. No big deal. Wow. And the Glen E Morrell Award for being for his performance as a recruiter. So just a couple little kind of fun facts about him. But Clay, it's amazing to have you on Legends today.
Thanks, Mike. It's a humbling honor to be asked to talk with you a bit this morning, and thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I've enjoyed our conversations, and it was great seeing you a couple weeks ago. Even though it was unfortunately for a somber circumstance, and that was Sergeant Major Ferrusi's memorial service, which was really well done, and it was awesome to see a lot of the people that came out in support of him. So it was good to see you there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Mike was a tremendous leader and mentor to many of us. It was humbling to be a part of that and say goodbye to a legend.
Yeah, I wish I would have had a chance, and an opportunity to sit down with him. But when he, kind of came on the radar when we were starting Legends, we reached out, and unfortunately, that's when he was sick, and we just never got an opportunity to actually iron out a time to sit down with him. Before unfortunately, he passed. But I think it's just, kind of lays credence to why it's so important that we do this kind of stuff. We don't know what the future holds. And, people would have loved to have been able to hear him for an hour and a half and talk about his kind of Ranger journey. But I don't know Sergeant Major Ferrusi as well as a lot of people do. And I know I didn't, kind of send you this in the show notes, but, is there anything you would, kind of say about the man, so that, we have it and, people can know kind of the impact that he had?
Yeah, I mean, I really came to know Sergeant Major Ferrusi through mentorship circles, and senior networks. Never worked with him directly, but I think what always called me or gravitated to getting to know him and building somewhat of that mentorship relationship with him was really when he came over to Fort Bragg at the 82nd Airborne Division. Just because so many of my peers and Rangers that I had such tremendous respect for had so much admiration for him. So I had quite a few opportunities to see him in and around the Fort Bragg area as I culminated my career there at Fort Bragg as the Joint Communications Unit CSM. And he was just always a guy who was upbeat. Just a people person at the core. He was all about people, and I always admired that. And I was constantly taking pages out of his playbook when I'd see him interact and just chatting. At the time that he decided to retire, I was in and around the same frame. So we started building a relationship outside of the military, just Ranger helping Ranger with transition stuff. He picked my brain, and I was just like, who am I to mentor on transition assistance of, Sergeant Major Mike Ferrusi. I mean, he's a legend that I've looked up to and admired, but very humble. And, throughout his journey, him and I were talking, as he overcame some of his illness. And, it was just, I was sad to see him go. Just a great man. And I think anybody that met him and spent at least 5 minutes with him could walk away with one thing and know that authenticity was at its finest with Mike Ferrusi. God rest his soul, and I hope to meet him in the big patrol base in the sky again one day, because he was just a great man.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for sharing that, and it's important to talk about him and the impact that he had. So I appreciate you kind of giving a little bit of the episode to do that. Well, let's start at the beginning. You did not have, a journey like a lot of people coming to Ranger Regiment. You had some time, in service prior to that. You went on and did, very successful things. For God's sakes, you were the Army Soldier, the, 2 Army Times Soldier of the Year. recruitment accolades and everything else. How did you find yourself, being approached and asked to come to the 75th Ranger Regiment?
So, yeah, interesting story. And if you got some time, I'll share it.
That's what we're here for, brother.
It was a long road and a rewarding one at that. My story kind of started in initial recruiting, and I'd initially decided to join the Marine Corps. A lot of my fellow teammates that I played football with had joined the Marine Corps, etc. And I failed the physical. I had an opportunity to play junior college football, but decided I wanted to go the military route. And I was 2 years pumped the brakes for me because I had to wait to get past a medical waiver to be able to get into the Army. And then since decided to join the Army. I really didn't know a whole lot about the Army other than the Army fought enemies of the United States. And I was happy to do whatever the Army asked me to do. So I picked at the time, it was 31 Kilo, which was combat communicator, which then changed to 31 uniform. Went off to basic training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma on an open Army contract. I had a guaranteed duty station there to Fort Lewis, Washington. And shortly after basic training, I really started learning about Rangers and what my assimilation of what a Ranger actually did. And all I knew is I wanted to be part of it. I wanted to be challenged, and I wanted to be aligned with the very best the Army had to offer. Volunteered for Option 40 in AIT. My roommate, which I know many on this podcast will know, was at the time Private First Class Jared Van Alst, then later Master Sergeant Van Alst. So Jared was my roommate in AIT, and he had an Option 40. And him and I were PG and APG in our AIT platoon there at Fort Gordon. And long story short is my 4187 was denied. They said, hey, you're going to go on to Fort Lewis, Washington and serve. So that went on. Reenlistment window came open as I did a PCS move internally to Fort Bliss. I was with an ADA unit, my first assignment. And still didn't work out for me to reenlist to go to the Ranger Regiment because the slots, as I was told by retention, but I always wanted to go. So I just kept grinding and grinding. And I had exposure to 2nd Ranger Battalion as a private on Fort Lewis. And every time I saw Rangers conducting PT, or if I saw them in the PX with black berets on, it's like whatever I need to do to get a chance to try out, I'm going to do it eventually. So that just amassed itself. Ended up reenlisting to go to Alaska versus being able to go to the Ranger Regiment. Got an airborne assignment. I worked for many of great Ranger legends. Command Sergeant Major Arlie Nefkin was my brigade CSM. Colonel Mike Fuller was my brigade commander. Acted with his satellite RTO as part of the TAC. So they always encouraged me. Major Christopher P. So all these Ranger greats, Grenada, Panama, Mogadishu era leaders that just kind of shaped me along the way. And I never gave up hope on it. Was selected subsequently at the tail end of that career to deploy to Afghanistan on a WIAS tasking for USASOC, and worked with our Green Beret friends in civil affairs. And then tagged for recruiting duty. Went on to do my recruiting duty. And when I was there, Jared Van Alst called me and said, hey, man, they got this new thing going on in the regiment called Ranger 21, and they're getting ready to hire a bunch of direct support and combat service support guys. Here's your shot. Because I always told him, if you ever hear of anything where I could try out. So sure enough, he put me in touch with the gentleman named Master Sergeant Russ Bell, who was the Sergeant Major. Master Sergeant Bell gave me a call on my recruiting station. I remember my station commander saying, hey, you got a phone call from some Master Sergeant from the 75th Ranger Regiment. It kind of lit up. I got super excited. We had a good phone interview. He said, can you pass a PT test? I said, absolutely, Sergeant. I said, I'll take it whenever you want. He invited me out to Fort Benning to do like a pre-rope assessment. I went and did my critical events, passed those with no issues. And he said, you'll get a slot. And the rest was history. I went to ANOC en route, was subsequently promoted from Staff Sergeant to Sergeant First Class, went to rope, and then did the gamut. And, spent generally the rest of my career in the Ranger Regiment. Had 2 little pops out, and then finalized my career there. So it was a very rewarding experience for me. to get the opportunity to try out. And, I was never going to look that gift horse in the mouth, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But thanks for asking, because it was, and sorry for the long-winded answer, because at
No,
every juncture, it seemed like I never would be able to go. And
yeah.
finally it worked out. And I had close to 10 years in the Army when I went to rope, and, was thankful for the opportunity. Couldn't imagine life without that opportunity at this point, some 16, 17 years later.
Yeah. I find that, people, you'll meet people in different walks of life, in the military, and, either they served in the Ranger Regiment, or, they never had a desire to, or they have a story, which really translates into an excuse at the end of the day. And I'm not hating on them. I'm not mad at them. But what I'm trying to say is that I find that people really, truly wanted to be part of Ranger Regiment, no matter how long it takes, no matter how many hurdles they have to overcome, they are going to get there. I mean, a lot of people don't know this unless they listen to the episode or they know him personally. But General McChrystal did not go to the Ranger Regiment the first 3 times he tried. He was denied, he wasn't able to, a different opportunity came about, so he actually didn't come to, Ranger Regiment until, he was a senior captain, but he kept on trying and he kept on wanting to do it, so my point being is that, it's a demonstration of, why you wanted to be there. And when you finally got there, you never looked back and you never took it for granted, and you just continued to improve the organization and improve yourself because you looked at it as an opportunity, as opposed to Mike Burke that was 18 years old and dumb as shit. And the only thing I did is I was relentless in my pestering of the Ranger recruiter at airborne school, like, because I didn't have a Ranger contract, and I would wait outside his office. I would go there during lunch. Like, I was going to see this individual because I wanted to get to Ranger Regiment. And then as soon as, I was able to, then now, but still, that wasn't much in comparison to what you had to do. But no, I appreciate, you sharing everything. And, you pretty much encompassed your whole career, but we're definitely going to talk about a few points, because, I want to pull the thread and, talk about your experience. So what was it like, showing up to the Ranger Regiment as a sergeant first class, a senior NCO?
Mike, I thought about this, as you were gracious and kind of telling me a few things you wanted to talk about this morning, and it was every single thing I ever wanted in the Army. I mean, I truly felt like I was surrounded by the best of the best. I mean, from the day that I showed up to rope, just the professionalism of the non-commissioned officer corps, the officers is across the board. It's like, damn, like literally every guy to the left and right of me, in front and behind me, is as good as me or better. And I was just I'm still a very goal oriented person, and I just think that competitive spirit was just, it all came full circle for me. And the thing that I always said to myself, coming from the conventional force to the 75th Ranger Regiment, before I really understood Abrams Charter, was that why isn't the whole Army like this? Why are we not as professional across the board? And it just took me a minute to really take it all in and understand that, as I evolved as a senior NCO into other positions, not only in the regiment, but a few assignments outside of the regiment, that was the construct of the design. And that was Abrams' charter, that he would amass the very best of the best to go back to the Army, much like you're doing yourself now, that it's a breeding ground for the Army's best of the best of leaders. So for me, it was everything I ever wanted. There was never a bad moment. Amidst frustrations that we all have in
Yeah,
any,
that's natural. Yeah.
it was worth it all. I was right at home from day one, and I enjoyed being challenged, and it humbled me, because truthfully, I agree. I don't know who said it way back when. I know we've all heard it as Rangers. If you want to get the best soldier in your unit, just hang out the big brown fence, because the guys that are doing the duffel bag drag will be the best, soldiers in your formation. They probably just made a mistake and they
Yeah.
need a second turn. So that was the first time in my career where I truly felt that my peer base were challenging me to the point that, hey, you don't have a day off. There's no second guessing. The levels of accountability you're going to be held to, and the measures of your performance are daily, not annually.
Yeah. I love how you use the term, you came home. like when you got there, you realized this was the place you were meant to be, and you had a long journey to get there. But once you arrived, you knew that's where you belonged. I love it. That's awesome. So you had one prior deployment prior to coming to Ranger Regiment, or did you have more than one?
I had two.
Oh, okay.
I had an AFAM mission post Gulf War with the Air Defense Unit. I did 6 months
Okay.
in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, which was interesting because that's when Saddam was up to his nonsense up north with the Kurds. So we did a show of force and pulled in 1st Cavalry Division, but we went to the line and we never got to cross it, although we wanted to. That goes. But my first deployment in the GWAT was as a WISE tasking, which I actually processed out of Fort Benning. And I ended up, they were looking for SAT RTOs, I guess is a long story short. And I ended up being assigned in the midst of what they referred to as a JRT, a joint regional team that was comprised of an ODA and civil affairs and PSYOPs team. So I was a direct support RTO for those guys. So I got to touch the magic a little bit differently in the soft community, and also had befriended two Ranger friends that were kind of out there to help us out with some snot activity.
Mhm.
Brian Parker and Sam McAllister.
Oh, okay.
Consider RD and RSC legends for sure, and God rest Sam's soul. We lost Sam a few years ago, but I took to Sam and Brian, did PT with them, and they were also Ranger leaders or peers really, because we were all staff sergeants at the time. They still encouraged me like, "Hey, dude, don't give up, man. We need good guys, and you should try out when you get a chance."
Yeah. Okay. So your first deployment in Ranger Regiment, what was that? What was that like?
It was, once again, it goes back to everything you ever wanted in an assignment in the Army from my Army experience. It was circa 2007, and we were getting fairly active in the Afghanistan AOR again. Things were circulating, and I think one of the defining moments of that deployment is one. Obviously I was drinking through a fire hose because I was a new guy,
Mm.
and I was learning a lot. But I had phenomenal subordinate leadership that fell in and embraced me. I really felt that I was well received, which I, kind of got some snippets. It's going to be the dog pissing on the fire hydrant syndrome. You're going to have a little bit of that. But I felt coming in as a more mature NCO that I was afforded the opportunity to allow these guys to see the human side of me, and I humbled myself tremendously, which I probably wouldn't have done in another assignment just by proxy of, I'm an NCO and my authority base is in my dominance. So that it caused me to shift the paradigm. It's a technique, but it's not a desired method especially in that environment. So we were very, very active. And we were doing everything from, direct support RTO missions to making sure the jock had all the blinky lights on so we could see our RSR feeds and we could have effects on the enemy. But I think when it really came full circle for me, we had a very, very big mission that transpired there, as we affectionately refer to as the Big Mish. And I'm sure some of my friends out there will smile when they hear that. But it was humbling to me to be sitting in Morales Hall on Bagram Airfield, and you mentioned General McChrystal earlier when he came out to talk to the task force and to tell us the significance of what we were about to do and endeavor upon. And I just said to myself, I said, this is exactly why I joined the Army, and this is exactly why I joined the Ranger Regiment. And I really assessed the total experience still to like our Super Bowl,
Mhm.
for what we did. You couldn't have a more active experience. You couldn't put a value on, our professionalism to be entrusted with this mission, etc. And the fact that I got to be a part of it is still so humbling. Might have waited a little too long to have the effects we wanted to, but we still did some great work. And from there, it just kind of set conditions for the rest of my career in the Ranger Regiment. And to have showed up on the first deployment and be part of something that big was a tremendous experience for me, not only as a Ranger and a soldier, but as a human being and in my leadership development. To know that you got to have your game face on, and that's what we were there to do.
Yeah. I think we take it for granted, a lot of times the missions and the things that we got to do overseas, but you come in with a more mature aspect, as a senior NCO and other things that you've been trying to do. So I think your perspective is amazing, that you came into the Ranger Regiment and you got to be a part of that stuff. And you were almost kind of awestruck with the strategic importance of the missions that we were doing at those times, um, but that wasn't the only, deployment where you were part of, significant operations and legendary operations, if I could say so. You also had an amazing one in 2008 as well.
Yeah. That once again, it's just like things just continued to climb. It's like you think about it, I'm a big deer hunter, just come off killing a PR buck. It's like, where do you go from there? And it continued to climb. And the next deployment we were super active. We unfortunately we took some losses. It was one of the more heavier losses that we'd experienced in the Afghanistan AOR, and had some really significant missions. I considered myself fortunate to be able to share workspace with Delta Company, 275, when the Delta Company stood up. So by proxy, it just worked out to where I deployed as their battalion commo chief as part of TF South. And in 2008, which I think most of the audience knows, we had some pretty significant missions there. One in mission where Master Sergeant Leroy Petry indeed earned the Medal of Honor. To be able to support those missions and just be a small spoke in the wheel, to make sure those guys had what they needed to get things done, was once again a tremendous experience. And I was honored to be able to be a part of that mission too as well. I mean, the dynamics of that environment with just everything you think about with decentralized operations and the pace we moved was just always impressive to me. Not because I was supporting it, but just to look around and see all the things that we were accomplishing and the effects that we were having on the enemy in such a decentralized environment was just still, to me, when I really, really take it all in now that I'm retired, and I kind of synthesize things and think about the overall experience, was nothing short of amazing. I mean, you had Ranger greats that are still out there, and then Major Chung, now Colonel Chung, was the deco commander, along with his Ranger legend first sergeant there, and Reese Teakle, still out there, great things. I mean, just had the experiences to be shaped and be part of a tremendous leadership model. Platoon Sergeant Greats and Eric Bohannon, who's out there doing great things, leading the task force there in Iraq now. Chris Mullinex, 1st Infantry Division CSM. Jared Steidle, who was a story legend. And I know Jared's out there crushing it. And I just had a tremendous amount of respect for all those guys. And they welcomed me to the fold. Was able to get out there and get after it on some of those missions with them. And, I think as we pulled back and, we looked at that force mod in design, she sit with battalion commander, then Colonel Carilla, and Command Sergeant Major Glen E. They talked about selecting, the all-stars across the formation, and not depleting all the talent from one company to make this rock star. But in my opinion, they did a tremendous job of balancing the force with the right talent. And the things those gentlemen accomplished on that deployment were nothing short of amazing.
Yeah, I agree. And the deco standing up, that was tough. That was tough all the way around, because not everybody sent over talent. Some people offloaded people that they didn't want in their formations, but the culture that they quickly created. And I've had the benefit of talking to Colonel Chung, since that time. Him and, Sergeant Major Teakle both learned rapidly, hey, how do you get a culture built where no culture, no climate existed before, and create that pride? And they learn a lot of lessons in that, but it's amazing, now looking at it and the things that they accomplished. You see the great work that they did. I do have to ask, because I don't think I've ever actually sat down and had a conversation with anybody that was on the other side of, the deco mission where, Leroy got the Medal of Honor. what was the vibe like, and, the environment, and the support position of that, while those events were transpiring on the ground?
Yeah, it was pretty surreal. I remember, we planned deliberately for NAIs in that area for
Mhm.
quite some time, and everything happened really fast. And we did have some reserves there. Where at the time the mortar platoon sergeant was Jake Smith. Jake Smith and I were in reserve. We had to push resupply where we were going to get out. And I knew shortly thereafter, once they hit the Y, they made contact, and the rest of the story, as we know. But to experience that in the jock for me was a little tough because we were so busy that deployment that everyone that had been through the TFT cycle was typically on target, that we could get on target. So sitting there and watching those guys in a pretty significant gunfight was hard for me personally. I
Mhm.
would have preferred to have been on the objective, just
Yeah.
for obvious reasons, because I was able to get some skin in the game on that deployment. And I love those guys. So truthfully speaking, to hear those call signs the uh, come across the jock and on wave was pretty significant to process. I mean, we did what we needed to do, and we got things done. But when the smoke cleared, I thought the vibe was a very big sense of pride. I mean, I can still remember like just almost the outward awestruckness of from the task force commander to the sergeant major as they're sitting in the jock when they heard what Leroy did. And it was almost immediate. Like we knew that this was just next level heroism,
Mm.
with not much thought involved, but it's just the right thing to do that a ranger would do. And I've always admired Leroy's humility. uh Great ranger, great husband, great brother, great friend. And it was humbling to support that operation. And it'll always be a high water mark to know that we got a lot of things right that night. And to experience that whole entire environment. And then also on the flip side of it, being a senior NCO, and kind of the Fallout 1 drills with such the disparity of chain of command and NCO support channel, that at the time it was Major Bartholomew's was the strike force commander, or task force commander rather. And having to preside over Specialist Christopher Gaithe-Cole's memorial there at Salerno was a somber moment. Chris was a good kid, and
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
kind of came to know those guys. Like I said, 275 C&E platoon and Delta Company 275 had this like really cool relationship because we shared the space. You
Yeah.
know, there was a lot of annex going on, a lot of revelry, camaraderie. Every now and again I come into work and guys would be hogtied and thrown in the shower, and you know yeah, just the Ranger antics. So we really grew together. It wasn't that I see that, I saw it, and I kind of lived it, where you'll have the disparity of like a line element that has that camaraderie the day in and day out, and then support element, rather it be direct support or combat service support, kind of gets locked in there. So it takes a little time to earn that credibility. I think where we had our in that realm, there was a lot of that street cred already established because we lived in the same workspace and we were working through the TFT cycles and the MLATs together. So all that came full circle on that deployment.
You talk about the C&E platoon, you talk about deco, and I actually, you spurred a memory, the annexes. I forgot about those. I forgot about those trailers, the temporary trailers that they actually set up, that now is the 275 riff and motor pool and everything else. I actually forgot about that stuff, and I didn't realize you guys were over there.
Yeah.
But you also came to Ranger Regiment at a time where everything was transitioning, not only the deployments, but then also a lot of the more modernization stuff. And you mentioned that, briefly a second ago. There was a lot of changes being happen. And I would argue that some of the biggest changes that we had were actually in, the communication realm, and the equipment that we were using and the way we were using it. And we're developing that was actually the start of what the Army sees now. Now it's, standard issued equipment, so to speak. But back then it was kind of revolutionary in nature.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we were living as a regiment, and then I guess what I lived as an NCO, was you saw the regiment go from 2 communications MOSs to 11. With the standing up of the Ranger Communications Company, we had some force mod and FDU redesign, where we started bringing in more of those service support communications MOSs, which quickly became direct support. And I think the one thing that the regiment got right when we developed that training path is we brought in those new MOSs within the communications CMF, was that we trained everything from the X back to the shot. And when we talked about that, we were talking about the satellite shot that brought us down to start communicating and transporting data across the battlefield. But we did a really good job, in my opinion, of training a multifunctional communicator, because we understood that if it plugged into a battery pack or a wall, our Ranger customer, which were the assaulters, expected us to be able to fix that and be able to use it appropriately, along with our JTAC friends. We had to get it right. Our weapon system was a push to talk.
Yeah.
We're out on the objective and obviously out on the jock. So that was really neat, and it was transitional because a lot of those new MOSs were filtered to the line battalions from the Ranger Communications Company. And then over time, we were able to build capacity to where those slots could go direct to the battalions. So it created more of that organic effect, which I felt had good effects on the team building. And it wasn't the guy who's here to support me. This is a guy I see every morning. He either looks shitty in the morning or he's got a smile on his face. We're still going to do some PT.
Yeah. I had to laugh when you said that basically if electricity runs into it or it takes a battery, you said it very eloquently, but the truth is, from a Ranger perspective, line perspective is if it's not working, it's an S6 guy's fault. RTO, what the hell? Why is this not working? And you're like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, why is this my problem?
Yeah. All good comms guys look like MMA fighters, whether they get on the mat or not, because they ate a few face shots in their time. They didn't last very long.
Yeah, that's true. They had to have thick skin. That's for sure. There's no
Yeah.
doubt about that. Well, you mentioned, the Regimental Signal, company, and you got the honor and the privilege of, being the first sergeant of that communication company. Were you the first one or the second one that was
I
actually the
was,
first sergeant?
I was the second first sergeant of the Ranger
Okay.
Communications Company.
How did that come about that you got offered that job? And
So
I mean, and that's significant, for everybody listening, that's significant because outside of 11 series, there's not a lot, and then, okay, we stood up the Echo Company early in the GWAT. So, we had, Will Richards on, he talked about that. But when we talk about communicators, like you were never going to be a first sergeant in the Ranger Regiment. And if you were a master sergeant in the Ranger Regiment, it wasn't going to last very long before you had to leave the formation. So being a first sergeant in the Ranger Regiment as a communication specialist is a big freaking deal.
yeah, it goes back to just once again exceptionally humbled to had even been considered. Because my peer base was phenomenal. We had Josh Smith down at First Ranger Battalion, my era. Scott Stetson was at 375. All of us were in zones of consideration for promotion to Master Sergeant. Had been selected. I still remember we just wrapped up that deployment in '08, and at the time, Command Sergeant Major Legg, he called me up for some counseling. Say, hey, what's your plan? I said, well, it's funny you say that, Sergeant Major. I said, because I was going to ask you if you had a plan for me. Here's mine. So we had a good pro dev counseling session with the battalion sergeant major. Always could look to Sergeant Major Legg for excellent advisement. Had a tremendous amount of respect for him and the way he mentored Ranger leaders. And we laid out the plan. I had 4 courses of action. And obviously my number one was like, well, if I'm getting consideration from the RSM, the time was Command Sergeant Major Doug Pallister. I'll compete, but I knew very good and well that, in my opinion, that Josh or Scott was every bit as qualified as I was, and I was ready to accept the fact and congratulate them on their selection as well. But ultimately, for whatever reason, the battalion sergeant majors and RSM selected me. So I felt the obligation to do everything to the very best that I could do. I think I shared with you, a while back when we were talking, the old famous track star there, Steve Prefontaine, always said, to give anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift. It's kind of the way I approach that, and I felt like I was an ambassador for the rest of the Army, because as we started opening up the Ranger 21, where we were recruiting within our inner service and providing soldiers opportunities, that I had to be that example. I had to be a stalwart professional and give my very best every day. So it was a little bit of pressure. I ain't gonna lie. I was like, I can't mess this one up. This is second generation, and I'm coming behind the likes of then first sergeant and later Sergeant Major Harry Ferguson, who still is one of my most respected senior leader mentors as
Absolutely.
a NCO and Ranger. So just humbled. Sorry, I'm rambling on a little bit, but
No, you're not rambling at all, man.
striking on some very significant memories for me. And it was a great opportunity. As I left 275, I was leaving the greats of now Sergeant Major Randy Plant and First Sergeant Nick Shearer, who's still out there doing great things. I had Roger Ramirez and James Sullivan. I had warrant officers like Matt McDougal and SIGOs like Steve Herman. I was surrounded by so much talent, Mike. It just kept me on my game, and those guys taught me more than I ever taught them. Keeping the rails on there. So we went down there, and it was very active. I had once again fell in on great leadership, and it was a good almost 30 months that I had as a first sergeant down there at RCC.
That's amazing. Well, congratulations. You mentioned the first warrant officer on this podcast. So no one's ever mentioned a warrant officer before. So congratulations.
Yeah, Matt was amazing. I mean, I'd like to be more in touch with Matt than I was, but there wasn't much that Matt couldn't solve.
Yeah.
And on the tech side, he was just he was Johnny on the spot. And I was fortunate enough to serve with him in other capacities throughout my career in and outside the Ranger Regiment.
Yeah. Well, that's not where the Ranger story stopped, for Clay Usie, because you also got another opportunity, a unique opportunity that not many people can say. You got to serve as the Regimental Signal Sergeant Major.
Yeah, so we ran pretty hard with the RCC, and I think a few of the things that we were able to accomplish there was just we made a very pivotal transition under then first sergeant, now Sergeant Major retired Harry Ferguson's leadership, as he kind of handed the ball to me as we were significant in placing a Force Mod 25 series in the RS8 shop. We really started getting after things that we needed to iterate on to get ahead of the enemy. And Sergeant First Class Jason Walker, now CSM Walker, was our first guy that we put in the shop. And Jason still is has always been the kind of guy that'll make you row. And he really pushed us, very significant in helping us to get the first secure en route communications package online, to where we had comms from departure airfield to the X and the PI. So wrap that up, had a unique experience with the RCC to be with the RSTB's mission, with some other things we had going on in Afghanistan. And I spent 10 months kind of dual hatted running that program forward overseas with the RCC job. Things kind of came full circle with recruiting, as RSM Merritt and then Colonel Carilla, now General Carilla, wanted to get after recruiting a little bit more deliberately on the inner service. So I did have a unique opportunity in that to stand up the first inner service recruiting detachment in its current construct. So that was very rewarding duty that I think paid good dividends for the Ranger Regiment. Once again, humbled to be a spoke in the wheel, but we were able to get LNOs out to all of the AITs for our combat service support and direct support MOSs to kind of increase some of that throughput, as we knew our numbers were arguably, every 2-to-1 for attrition through the RASP POI. Finished up that assignment. RSM Merritt kicked me out to LSU to park me, as he said, and I served as senior military instructor there, which is a very unique assignment. And the plan was for me to come back as the regimental signal sergeant major, but once again, I didn't know if that was going to indeed happen, just because of the competitive pool and the timing of things. But it came full circle. Was selected for sergeant major, and had a unique opportunity to go to the USASMA, the long course. The plan was initially to go to just ASEA, which I was a little tearful that didn't work out.
Yeah.
I didn't want to have to do 3 PCS moves, but I got over it really quickly. I just took a knee and drank some water, went to the long course, made very lasting relationships, had a great pro dev experience, was able to make the graded executive RASP and get past Sergeant Major Navarro and Paquette. Critical events, and it's good to see Ranger buddies come out there and put me to the test, and came back and became the regimental signal sergeant major. And once again, another assignment that I felt tremendously humbled to be selected for, and to be able to represent the Ranger Regiment and get out there and being an ambassador, not only to get after the must-dos, but to continue to share the story and bring new communicators into the Ranger Regiment, as that was always something we were challenged with during my era, was manning. Just based on the fact that you just don't get to show up to the regiment, as we all know. You got to make the grade.
Yeah. I think, you talking about, the recruitment detachment, and standing that up, getting 11 Bravos into the Ranger Regiment, for the most part is pretty easy, because it's a large pool, and you whittle it down. You're going to probably have most of the people that you need. At least, you're going to be filled. You're going to be able to get 40% in very easily without really doing anything. However, all the support services and, other branches is extremely hard and extremely difficult, not only to educate them and get the information out about the Ranger Regiment that we're actually hiring those MOSs, because most of them don't even know that, but then, getting the individuals that can actually pass the requirements is a whole nother challenge. So, the Ranger recruitment program that you helped, spearhead is something that I've actually adopted as well for my current job. And I've pulled some of the TTPs and best practices. Now, we recruit a different population for the most part, but still at the same time, getting individuals out there to educate the formation is an integral part of it.
Right. And, Mike, to your point there, I remember doing a recruiting trip out to Fort Carson, Colorado, on the 4th Infantry Division. And we were setting conditions to put our first Ranger L&O, then Staff Sergeant Mike Malco. And Mike and I were in the shopette, grabbing a Red Bull and probably some beef jerky or something after the recruiting briefing. And this young man walks up to me, and he's a specialist, and he's very respectful. He's like, "Master Sergeant," he said, "You mind if I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure, shoot, bud." And he said, "What does that tan beret mean?" And I was like, almost rocked back on my heels. And then, he was very genuine in asking this, and he was a mechanic in 4th Infantry Division, and he did not understand what the tan beret represented. So I went through the snippets with him, and I explained that to him, that was the organizational headgear of the 75th Ranger Regiment, what it took to earn one. And he showed up, and I probably should have tracked him better, but he did show up to take the PT test, and he passed, and, we put his packet in. But one of my comments back to then Sergeant Major Mike Masson and then Colonel Joe Ryan, now Major General Ryan, was, we flatter ourselves that everyone in the Army knows who we are, sir.
Yeah.
So we have to be more active in our recruiting efforts, where we actively recruit versus passively. And granted, recommendations like, Jared Van Alst knew me, and I obviously I worked out, but that's few and far between. We got to get out there, get after it. And we built a really cohort. Damon Van Landingham was there doing it before, so I don't want to get it twisted. It wasn't the first recruiting efforts we had, but we just got larger scale. We built some capacity, and Damon and I were able to work together to kind of really touch the Army. It was a very unique and rewarding assignment. And recently, about a year ago, I met Master Sergeant Q, who's running the Rec D now. So it's kind of neat to think that that was like over a decade ago. And he approached me to introduce himself, and it was really rewarding to hear that things are still going well, and that's something that's benefiting the regiment and their retention.
Yeah. When I look at your career and I look at all the things that you've done in Ranger Regiment, it's hard to not go, man, this is a guy that just every time an opportunity presents itself, he takes full advantage and then he excels, in every single thing that you've done, from your time before Ranger Regiment to, you having significant firsts within the Ranger Regiment and leading the way on a lot of different programs and being able to do that stuff. And I would make the argument, even going to USASMA, was a big deal as well. Jasovsky, while a unique opportunity, leaving the Ranger Regiment and going to USASMA is, well, it's an endeavor all on its own. Let's just say that. Plus, anytime you leave the brown fence, you might find yourself never being able to come back, and that's always a fear that we all have. But the reason I'm saying it like that is you also did some amazing things, in your off time. And, you and other Rangers going out there and, running or riding bikes, doing just epic things and really raising awareness to programs or just highlighting how even senior Ranger NCOs can get it done and really kind of do these amazing things.
Yeah, we got after a few things. It was fun, just the one of the things that I really enjoyed about the Ranger Regiment was the physicality, and even times where I fell short, was humbling. Just to recock and get after things. But I think one of the things that I'm most proud about, it was pivotal for me, was after my deployment in 2010-11, we came back, and that was a long one for me. I stayed for 2 George cycles to help get some things off the ground and support some transition with the RSTC. And Brett Johnson and I were, sitting in the backyard because Brett was my workout buddy. Current art.
That's a hell of a workout buddy to have, by
Yeah,
the way. Yeah.
we used to drag each other around, and Brett dragged me around more. But Brett helped me come. I had a knee injury that I had to overcome that was plaguing me. A couple of surgeries and whatnot. And Brett and I were neighbors, and Tommy Williams at the time, and we did a lot of PT together. On the weekends, and had a little gym built out. But anyway, we were finishing up a workout and drinking a beer, and we decided, let's go ride the Silver Comet Trail. So just Ranger Fit, and then Eric Bohannon got wind of it too, and we decided to go ride the largest paved bike trail in Smyrna. And then after we finished that one, we got wind of this race called Run Across Georgia, Run for the Heroes. And we're like, well, what's all this about? And it's a 260-mile race, ultra marathon. You got 8 members of the team, and it's a consistent relay. So Brett and I were talking. It's like, man, I think we could do this. We could recruit a few guys. So, next thing we know, we start recruiting the team. We talked to Jonathan Kipp. He's like, I'm in. We talked to Chuck Kogel. Chuck's like, I'm in. We talked to Joe Sharp. He's like, I'm in. And, we get all our team together. Mark Davis was on the team, and I hope I'm not missing anybody. But long story short is, we did really no training whatsoever. Just in my opinion, hats off to our raw coaches in the program, and just the deliberate approach to being a master at the Big Five, and physical fitness being one of those. And we go out there and we run across Georgia in 34 hours and 17 minutes, and we set the military course record. And it was James Spencer. I left the name of James was our rabbit.
Okay.
We wouldn't have done it without James. Command Sergeant Major, soon to be retired, just giving up 175. But when I think back on that we just went out there and brought it. And we had some really world-class triathlete type civilian dudes that definitely got to sleep a whole lot more than us, and the high tempo was a little calmer for them. But that was a huge accomplishment for us, and we were able to raise some awareness and help out with the programs. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we still have the record. I guess I'll have to run on the big dogs and check the plaques Uh,
Yeah.
the only thing we held ourselves to when we brought the team together, I remember Brett and I were talking amongst the team. So what's our goals here? Well, obviously we want to win. And it just popped up. And I think it was Brett, if I recall correctly, or it might have been Chuck Kogel said, well, if we can hold an 8-minute mile Ranger standard, we'll win the race. And I said, I agree with that. And I said, we'll own the night. I said, because we're all getting energy as soon as the lights go out. It's just who we are. And it worked out, you know. Eric Davis, too. I'm sorry. I'm kind of spotty here with the names, but Eric Davis was also on the team. His wife, Shara, and my wife, Tammy, were kind of our chow support. They kept us well fed and watered. And we had Travis, Coach Travis was on the bus with us, making sure that we were properly hydrated. But it was just a testament. It was like wouldn't equate it to best ranger at all, because that's a whole different level. But a lot of those fellas had went on to do great things. And when I think about the significance of that team, from a young first sergeant to young senior NCOs, and where we've gone in our careers, and to take that on was just always a great memory, man.
So
Sorry to gloat, but
no,
just,
what was the average distance that every team member ran?
so we ran between 3.1 miles and 8.6. I think, if I remember correctly, it was like the variance in there. And it was either 8 or 9 legs. So
Oh,
what it
holy crap.
a person. So what it ended up being is each one of us ran over 33 miles, I think was the absolute math. And you know, you had on the short end, I think it was like 2.5 hours, to the high end of 4 and some change, that we were consistently running. So when you came out of your rotation with the rotation or 8, you would just refit and rolling out, hydrating, and going again, because we were trying to run as fast as we could, obviously, because it was a relay.
Yeah.
Towards the
Jeez.
end, it was quite the gut check.
I
Um,
can imagine.
and when we hit those hills heading towards Savannah, because the race started at the New Infantry Museum and it ended at Eastman Park in Savannah. And, you know, we hit those hills. It definitely let us know we were alive.
I imagine. Well, I think it's a great segue. You talk about the hours spent, 34 hours, running together, and a little bit of the preparation, and I'm sure the recovery on the back end. But, that's just this symbolic of the brotherhood,
Absolutely.
and the hours when you're relying on others and others are relying on you, when you encompass your entire Ranger career, what did the brotherhood overall mean to you?
It's hard to put a value on it, Mike. I'll be honest. If people often ask me now that I'm retired, you miss anything, and it's always absolutely yes. I miss the brotherhood.
Mhm.
It's very hard to replicate. Um, you know, I think it's everything that encompasses the Ranger Regiment, because when you look at the core competencies of the Ranger Regiment, obviously the Ranger Regiment will continue to be masters at the basics, and they will own the big five, and they will have effects on the enemy. But the brothers that you earn by rite of passage is just extraordinary. You know, I was raised in South Louisiana. I had great strong family roots, and my mother's dad used to always tell me when I was a kid, blood is thicker than water, and
Mhm.
I agree, because that's the science behind it. But I think that brothers that are earned by rite of passage is even then more so, because those brothers are willing to spill their blood for you, and they do. And it's not even a thought. I mean, when we go back to talking about like the heroic efforts of Master Sergeant Leroy Petry, that was
Yeah.
second nature. I have no doubt in my mind knowing Leroy before and after, and nothing's changed about him. And if he was asked to do it again, I have no doubt that he would do it again, and every other Ranger in the formation would. That's what makes us who we are. It's really not because we hate the guys that are in front of us that we got to deal with. It's because we love the guys to the left and right of us, and then the guys that are behind us. That's why we fight so hard. And you got to be there to know it. And that's when I get an opportunity to talk to young men about coming to the Ranger Regiment. I have not quite had the opportunity to talk to a young lady yet, but I welcome that opportunity too, if and when it comes. It's that's what makes the Ranger Regiment so special. It's the brotherhood and now sisterhood. You just don't replicate it. And you're going to chase it the rest of your life. unless you're at Fort Benning or Fort Lewis or Joint Base Lewis McChord, Savannah. I eagerly look forward to invitations to attend things at the HQ. And if the RSM would give me a parking spot, I'd probably show up more often. You know,
I'll talk to Brett. I'll talk to
yeah,
Brett.
exactly. I'm never reluctant to accept an invitation to be with Ranger Brothers. And my wife often laughs. She'll take a picture of me. She's like, "Look at you, you're glowing." I said, "Yeah, I am." The picture because I'm amongst brothers, and
Yeah,
to have that many, some are blessed with a few by virtue of family, but the rite of passage to me is very, very important and special to me in my life.
I absolutely love that you made a reference. And I don't remember what book it's from, but you said that it's not actually hate. And I think, there's this misnomer and there's a lot of things, and some of them are said in jest, that, Rangers are fueled off of caffeine, tobacco, and hate.
Yeah.
Um, and, it's funny and we all laugh, but it's actually not true. We're fueled by love and love for one another and love for the organization in a whole, and that we never, ever want to let it down every day. We just released a episode with Tony Main, who's just a phenomenal individual that does amazing things for the Ranger Regiment continuously, like daily. That guy's doing something for the Ranger Regiment, and he's been retired for a while now, and it's out of love, and how much that organization gave him, and how he just continuously want to give back. You got guys like Jeff Struker, getting ready to go and do a bike race in Africa, so that he can make donations through Rangers Foundation, whose entire purpose is to give back to Rangers. It's just, I know I'm kind of going on and on and on, but I think that sometimes people, while we understand it, we don't vocalize how much this place means to us.
Absolutely. And I think, going back to just the significance of the commitment to each other, I just haven't seen it. I've been retired near 4 years, and the only place I find it at its level is amongst Ranger Brothers. And, you can try to explain it, you can try to touch and taste it, but you're going to be the different guy in the room or gal that when that time comes. I don't know if any of our female Rangers are senior enough to have going through transition, and that's what I look for. But that's the inherent responsibility of Ranger for Life. And, Tony and Jeff are absolutely role models to us all in the Ranger for Life mantra. Tremendous amount of respect for both of those gentlemen, and consider myself blessed to have worked with both of them.
Yeah. Man, it's such a phenomenal conversation. Sorry. I'm as we're sitting here talking about it, I'm just thinking of, just even things in the last month, like seeing you, haven't seen you in a long time. We've talked a few times, but, and just seeing you, and it's like, we've never been apart, and that connection's just immediate, and just other individuals like that common bond that we have. It's just unbelievable. Well, a question that I am just actually, I'm sorry, hold on. Before, I know you've done a great job throughout the episode, but if there's anybody that you just kind of didn't get a chance to talk about, great Ranger leaders that shaped you, is there anybody else that you'd just like to, give a shout out to or say thank you to or appreciate?
Mike, man, so many. I want to miss, anyone, but, I know I mentioned Sergeant Major Harry Ferguson. Harry was like my first Ranger buddy. Truthfully, as soon as I passed my critical events, I was going to be Harry's backfill. So I'm sure Harry had some skin in the game. He wanted me to make it.
Yeah.
So he could go on to do great things as the first RCC first sergeant that had been selected. But Harry was a great mentor to me, and Harry and I's stories were very similar. Harry was very successful in the conventional Army. He came over as a senior NCO as well. Had a phenomenal run as a drill sergeant as well. I think Harry was like drill sergeant of the year at Fort Gordon, competed.
I have no doubt.
No doubt. I mean, Harry was just like, when you talk about a scholar athlete, Harry Ferguson defined scholar athlete. And every time Harry talked, I just got out my notebook and my pen, because there was a snippet and quite frankly, more than snippets of good information. And I couldn't thank Harry enough from day one. He was my sponsor into the organization, and I was blessed to follow him all the way through to the most senior rank for our MLS in the Ranger Regiment. And Harry was someone that I never wanted to disappoint. And I hope I did, do that. I mentioned, Randy Plant and Nick Shira. They were close to ICs to me. And I mean, anything that we did that was successful was because of Randy and Nick. I mean, just phenomenal Rangers. I had the cohort of amazing senior NCOs, awesome legendary first sergeants and Brian Gargantia and Steve Walters. My sergeant majors were just the best. I mean, when I look at like those who I was developed by, it's just so humbling. I mean, you just go down the list. I mean, Sergeant Major Pallister was always the voice of reason. His humility is always something I still try to earmark. Um, Eddie Nolan was very influential on me as a battalion CSM. He pushed me. He drove me hard. He gave me opportunities that I don't think I would have had anywhere else. He took me out of my MOS. Sergeant Major Rick Merritt, Chris Hardy. I mean, just all the greats. They all had different leadership styles, but yet similar. Because at the core, they came back to the Big Five, and they were just stalwart Ranger NCOs. But I took pages out of all their playbooks, and on the officer side, I think battalion commanders just the same. I mean, the greats, General Carrillo, Colonel Chris Fanek, had the opportunity to work for General Scott Miller, not in the Ranger Regiment, but as my commander at JSOC. Major General Joe Ryan, Major General Brian Eifler. It's just, I was saying earlier, that the charter to me was just words when I went to rope that I knew I had to memorize. But as I matured, I understood its meaning, and now I see it. You see it come full circle, when you read the charter and you see who's leading the Army, out there across the board. But they definitely all had very significant, Sergeant Major Chuck Albertson, was my first, Sergeant Major to report as a director at Sergeant Major. Chuck always made time for me. That's one of the things that I was tremendously appreciative of with Chuck. I wasn't discounted as the direct support. He welcomed me to the fold. I had a voice. He was interested in where we were going with the CMF, and I was always tremendously appreciative of that. Craig Bishop came right behind him. Same thing. Craig's been a trusted friend and senior as well. I mean, I could go on, but I consider myself blessed to have been led by the greats, and I can only take pages out of their playbooks and replicate. I think one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever been given, and it was actually given to me by Sergeant Major when I was in recruiting command, and we were kind of working through some friction points, not him and I, but friction points organizationally. And he was talking to me directly in a counseling session. He said, Clay, you're going to take your individual characteristics, everything right you've seen and everything wrong you've seen, and you're going to amass those in one big ball. And that's going to develop your individual leadership style, because you're going to focus on the things that need to be done, but you're going to take those three domains there and interweave that through every type of leadership situation you're going to find yourself in. And I think taking those pages from those who show you what right looks like is very important. And there's also taking pages from some that don't show you exactly what right looks like, that helps you get it right. And it allows you to have the uncomfortable conversations when you got to hold folks accountable, or you got to be held accountable, just so you can earn it, and that's what I always appreciated about the leadership in the Ranger Regiment, that we always had the ability to look each other in the whites of the eyes and have very tough conversations, and typically not take it personal. And it was always, in my opinion, sometimes coarse, but it was respectful. And it goes back to your points, Mike. Love. We love each other, no doubt about it. I haven't met a single Ranger that wouldn't do a damn thing for one another. And seeing that in Three Rangers Foundation, great things, Sergeant Major Mike Hall and Colonel Chris Vanek are doing with that organization, Marcus Hall. I mean, they're getting after it. I've been blessed to help them a little bit, but and see firsthand the great things that they're doing for our Gold Star families and our Rangers at large.
Yeah, man, you went through quite a list. A lot.
Yeah.
I wrote some more names down. I mean, the ever-going list of legends of the 75th. It's constantly getting added to, and I appreciate you sharing your sentiments about the word combination of all the greats that come before us and leaders that impact us. Well, so I'm gonna ask you a question before we kind of close out. That is just, I'm excited to ask it every single time. If you could stand in front of all Rangers, past, present, and future, what would you say?
I think we break this one down. I don't want to say, man, that's a tough one. Because it's just so much to say in so little time. But I think for Rangers of the past, who am I to tell those who led the way for me? But I think that there's some peers going back in there because I didn't get a chance, and I hope you don't mind, but I had some phenomenal peers that kind of helped me along the way too. And Tommy Williams, Ernesto Santiago, Rob Phipps, Roy Young were just tremendously value added as fellow first sergeants, and I think that that's where we built the cohort there, and it leads to Rangers of the past. I mean, we're Rangers for life. We're committed to that, and if there's something going on in your life, that doesn't quite assimilate, my words to Rangers of the past is reach out. The
Yeah.
network's alive and well. Where I'm located now here in Northwest Florida, basically Alabama. I learned that lesson that just by picking my head up and seeing a DUI flag on a boat made a tremendous friend in Troy Webb. Just cause veteran, was served in a regiment 8 years, and Troy and I became friends and started making more friends, and now we got about 70 Rangers that get together once a month, and we share the brotherhood and the camaraderie, but we also help each other out. We network. If there's things we need, we can kind of go there. So the Rangers of the past, just continue to be a Ranger. Not everybody around you is going to be a Ranger, but you can still lead by example, and they'll see that there's something different about you and really what makes us special. The Rangers present, you got, in my opinion, those who are leading the 75th Ranger Regiment, it just continues to get right and it gets better. I kind of amassed 10 tips that I spoke to in my retirement speech when I retired, and if I'd like to share,
Please.
and number one, if anything that I learned over my period of a 24-year career in the Army was scratch Murphy out the manifest every single day, because rest assured he's on it. And by doing proper PCCs, PCIs, your attention to detail, your adherence to the standards, and your commitment to a constant state of readiness is what makes us who we are as Rangers. My time is well gone from the Ranger Regiment, but I'm sure that has not changed. But that's a basic fundamental of being a Ranger. You have to value the fact that you're a professional problem solver by trade. That's what we get paid to do. We get the nation's hard problems, and many hands and eyes and brains make light work of hard problems. Be a master of the basics. I think that everything we do, or we did in the Ranger Regiment, my tenure, and I'm sure that that's the foundation they continue to stand upon. And any subject matter expert finds the genesis of their expertise in the basics. You have to innovate often and early, because if you wait for someone to bring you a new idea, new technology, or capability, you're probably already behind the innovation curve. And the enemies are not going to wait on you to figure it out. And remember that you get paid to think. It's not the plan or the concept that matters, but more so the level of detail and the critical thinking that goes on to planning and thinking. And that's what achieves results. Only you, the individual Ranger, can give the idea to higher headquarters to deliver you to bleeding edge technologies and solutions that benefit you as the warfighter. Remember, the first fatigue's mental. You always got to take care of yourself. It's easier said than done. But it's the nature of going further, faster, and fighting harder. Because the average service member knows hard, but you know a next level of hard. And we appreciate what you're doing out there. But remember, you're never good to yourselves or to your team without a balance in professional and personal life. And be humble in deed and word. No matter how good you are, quiet professionalism is not a slogan, it's a way of life. And you have to embrace it. Just keep that as a watchword. And that's the things that I would say to our Rangers that are, currently out there getting after it, continuing to fight the good fight, do those things that, obviously put you at a cutting edge, but humility is just a huge thing. You know, have the courage to take a chance and be willing to fail. If anything, I learned that I'm a product of my failures, not my successes. I learned more from failing than I did from being successful at things. And then continue to speak your mind. I know most Rangers present don't have a problem speaking your mind. That's why we call it a hot wash, because it gets hot sometimes. Just have the courage to tell people the truth and hold them accountable. It's not hard business, but it's just telling people the truth. And then, continue to communicate a lot like what you're doing here, Mike. I mean, I know you're still presently in the Army. I mean, you inform us with a lot of great information in the podcast, and those Rangers that are out there still getting after it, not telling you anything you hadn't heard before, but communicating effectively, it matters. And it creates an environment that fosters esprit de corps, morale, and camaraderie versus dissension and lack of morale. Just having some, good conversations. And then for the Rangers of the future, what I would say is that, if you take on this endeavor, you won't be sorry. It'll probably be one of the most rewarding things you do as a young man or a young woman coming out of high school. Even if it's later in life, you're entering a fraternity and a brotherhood and sisterhood for life. And wish you the best. And, if I can help any Ranger of the future and chatting about my experience, I'd be happy to give them snippets, outside of the podcast. But I really thank you for giving me the opportunity to answer that question, Mike.
Epic advice, man. There's so much there. And it's from years of being a leader and, at the top of your game and constantly just striving to be better, every single day. And not taking the privilege of serving in the Ranger Regiment for granted. And every single one of those points is just etched into the framework of what it takes to be successful in the Ranger Regiment as an NCO or as a leader, period. Honestly, they need to be expounded upon and probably put into a book, if I'm being honest with you, because they're awesome. Well, before I close this out, Clay, I can't thank you enough, man, for all the conversations you and I have already had, over the last year, and you taking the time to kind of sit down with us. Do you have any kind of closing thoughts, or anything else you'd like to say to the larger formation? And then also, what are you doing now?
I think thanks for asking a lot of great questions. That's caused me to take
Yeah.
my somewhat own advice. I think in closing, I'm just humbled to be here, Mike. I mean, I probably like most Rangers, in no shape, form, or fashion do I consider myself a legend. I just consider myself a young man who had an excellent opportunity to walk amongst giants, and it's quite frankly the high water mark of my life professionally. I don't think I'll ever achieve anything better than being a Ranger. It's kind of like the cadence we used to sing in basic training. Somewhere there's a mother crying for her son because he's an airborne Ranger.
Yeah.
I still can hear that jingle. At some points I think about it, my entire Army career, it's really all I wanted to be individually, is having that opportunity. Life after the Army, has been fun, but I still miss it. I don't have any regrets, but it's just a point in my life that I'll just feel tremendously blessed to have been part of. As of now, I spent 3 years in defense industry contracting. Did that with the company Augustine Consulting Incorporated. Great organization. going back to phenomenal leaders. And, another one that had influence on me is so many. Command Sergeant Major Daryl Thies gave me a great opportunity there. And I've had a good run with those guys. Took some time off and did some volunteer work. Started working with hurricane relief. My wife and I got to experience some pretty significant damage to Hurricane Sally living here on the Gulf Coast, and then my family in Louisiana as well. So did that for about 6 months, and I popped my head back up a couple of months ago, and I stood up my own LLC, and I'm self-employed with Usie Consulting Services, and I'm currently advising a startup company out of Louisiana that's got a second generation bypass filtration system in the oil and gas industry. Very unique work. It's causing me to think and learn a lot about oil and fuel and how to have a better hydrocarbon footprint on the planet. And doing some organizational leadership, but it's been fun working with some great teammates again. And that's about what I have going on. Life there after the Army, and just trying to continue to do some at every venture or every juncture that I can, give back to the community, doing some volunteer work, some nonprofit work and stuff. But it's where I find some solace there, is giving back. As so much has been given to me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on today, brother. I appreciate the conversation, and I know that everybody's going to get a ton, from kind of just listening to you, all your stories and, your entire journey, throughout your time. And it's going to definitely make them reflect on a lot of their time as well. And hey, thank you everybody else for tuning in to Legends of the 75th. Hey, please continue to share so that we can get out to all of our Ranger buddies. There's a lot of people that still don't know about the work we're doing here and the stories that we're sharing. Rangers lead the way.